Greetings to us and welcome to another video. I went to locals this past weekend. This is my second week with Vanquish Soul. I did one small change to the deck, but I just wanted to keep progressing and showing like my prowess with this strategy because as I face more different decks, I face more different matchups. I kind of like start seeing and like analyzing stuff that I can do with the deck and stuff that I can do to like make it better in the future. Um, but yeah, without further ado, let's begin. I'll show the deck profile first, and then I'll talk about the changes, and then I'll talk about the matchups and how relevant it was. Um, 3 Rosin, 3 Matlove, 2 Panthera, Pluton, triple Borgar, double Caesar. Those are it for the Vanquishers. 3 Parallel. This is an honorary Vanquisher now. Triple Crow, triple Ash, triple Impulse, Fire Attacker, Kurikara. That's it for monsters. Triple Stake Your Soul, triple Ride, double Small World, Rhoda, Talent, Continue, and Dust Devil. It's now 40 cards. Extra, triple Rock, Almirage, Phoenix, Cerberus, Unicorn Splash, Decode, Heat Soul and Access Code, Dempsey Baguska, Shaka 9, Borbo, and Zeus. So that's it for the main deck and the extra. I guess I'll go to the side real quick. Triple Droll, double Nib, double Bell, triple Cosmic, triple TC Boo, and double Evenly Mashed. Okay, so the first thing you probably noticed if you saw my last profile, I moved Ghost Bell to the side deck and I lowered the copies of Nib and Evenly. The main reason for that is that outside of Labyrinth, Ghost Bell isn't a really fair one-to-one trade against like most decks that I'm playing against in this format, barring like Branded. I did face only one Branded this weekend, and not even Ghost Bell saved me from game 3. I'll explain that in a moment. But yeah, I moved Ghost Bell to the side just because it wasn't super efficient as a hand trap in the main deck. And I just wanted the deck to stay consistent while doing what it was doing. I'm still playing the shared rides. You can make the argument for not playing this, but I'll talk about this in a second when I talk about my matchups. Triple Stake Your Soul. This is standard. As far as the monsters go, outside of the Ghost Bells changed, I upped Panthera to 2. So this is another thing that we're gonna talk about. The rest is pretty much like the standard. Okay, so this is week 2 of playing the deck. The number one reason for the second Panthera was I wanted more lower level Vanquish names so I can efficiently do the play that involves parallel exceed. And what makes it cool about Panthera specifically is that it doesn't waste your normal summon. So summoning with the Panthera means that if you get to parallel by linking this into the rock, you can make the King Dempsey, and the Rosin that you search from the King Dempsey becomes your normal summon. So that means that you can keep extending even further. Uh, I did that 2 times, and it worked both times splendidly. Another situation that I came up with, or that happened to me, was that um, I went second, and this into the parallel exceed just baited like a lot of cards. Um, and after they just like started wasting their resources on me trying to do this play, I then just normaled Rasen. Then they had like one last line of interruption, and then I had like a Caesar in hand, and then I just tagged it out for Caesar, and then I just kept playing. Um, and that was really, and that's something really cool about Vanquish Soul. Like if you have cards that help you tag out, that's why you're seeing like 2 Caesars and 3 Borgars. Um, like a lot of interruptions that are common in the game are targeting interruptions, so you can play around those. So just having another Vanquish as an extender, like kind of helps through that. The caveat is like you cannot play Fenrir if you do this, or like play other cards efficiently. But and this does conflict with Fire Attacker, which is also in the main deck. But just having it be another Vanquish name that can be used was good enough for me. I do not regret this choice at all. Um, but yeah, um, so as far as shared ride goes, um, as a week already passed, there are 2 analogies that I found with this card. One is that out of every single game I flipped this card, only one player played around it. Um, and it still won me the duel because the player that played around it couldn't play around my other interruptions. Um, the Having people play around this means that they're not doing their plays optimally, and that's good for you because if their opponent's deck has a higher ceiling than yours and they're not playing their deck as optimally as you are, you can win. Like you can win fair trades against those higher ceiling decks. Like I faced a Manadium opponent which didn't give me a single draw out of the shared ride. But not giving me a single draw meant that they lost out on like 3 potential extensions. Like they didn't search out of Lightheart, they didn't search out of Realmheart, they didn't search out of the Scareclaw Reichheart. Um, they didn't activate a position. They didn't like they did Imaginings, and that was like the only card that they did. Um, and that's really good for you. Um, Against the people who that do not play around this, then they're in for a hard time because like in this deck specifically, if you keep drawing cards, it's going to be bad news for them because Vanquish Soul thrives out of having like a lot of attributes in your hand. So like having more attributes means that you can play your deck as optimally. It makes it easier for you to OTK. It makes it easier for you to like just keep stopping your opponent. Um, in the future, I might consider um playing more copies of the Pluton because I feel like one big way that Vanquish loses is if they don't have ways to keep stopping your opponent if their opponent breaks your board. Um, and just having shared ride or something like the rescue ace draw you into Pluton is really strong because it pretty much turns it into your opponent not being able to stop you correctly and then them getting punished later on. The other card that I thought about playing in this deck, um, I guess I can keep it a secret, but it's a very old card. Um, People who probably know played past formats probably know which card I'm talking about. It's a card that people made a habit of playing around because it was technically like it was like one of the original hand traps back in the day. And in this specific deck, that card is actually really good. Um, because it's a dark attribute monster. If you can guess what the card is, write it in the comments. If not, you might see it in a future deck profile. Um, but yeah, um, so far I don't regret Sure Ride. And the second thing about Sure Ride is that if you go first against certain matchups, um, like you're pretty much guaranteed the game if this resolves. I faced two Flunders and two Manadiums, and I faced two Flunders, two Manadiums, and like a branded Chimera. And every time I went first and flipped this card, it was super advantageous. Um, but yeah, like those are like the main things to talk about. This past weekend, like the weekend before, I didn't summon Zeus almost ever. This past weekend, I summoned Zeus like 4 times, like doing the Zodiac strategy. Um, so I'm very thankful that I kept this in my extra deck despite not playing it as much. Um, Baguska is also really strong. It's another reason why Panthera is also important because if your opponent already has an established board and they let you get to 2 level 4s, you can make Baguska, and Baguska stops a lot of interruptions outside of Link monsters. So it really makes it really hard for your opponent to actually commit. Like against decks like Kashtira, Purely, Branded Chimera. You just summon this monster, and if they don't have the out, they like there is pretty much like ends their turn. The two Flunderies opponents that I faced, I won one of the matches solely because of this card. Like, it's not a real easy card to play around. Um, I only summoned access code once. This might become another card in the future. Uh, like, uh, there are other ways to OTK with this deck. Um, there are other ways of chipping your opponent's life points, like burning them multiple times with Borger, for example. Um, I I pretty much won a game because I had like the King Dempsey, I had the Zeus, and with the Rock of the Vanquisher, I special Caesar from hand. And my opponent was like just baffled that a Link 1 monster can just summon a 3k beater, like for free. Um, so that was something to note. Um, but yeah, like as far as this deck goes, I'm not gonna say it's fully solved. But there are things that I might like try in the future. Like I might give Fenrir another chance. Um, I might play the Durandal cards. Um, I saw Jake Quincy's list. He played. He showed like a going second list. What I mainly didn't like about it is that he did not play Panthera, and I feel like, uh, even if you're not playing Parallel Exceed, you should really just play Panthera at least one copy because it being a searchable Earth that's not Caesar, that's already enough to warrant this card, like in your main deck. Um, But yeah, so this past weekend, it was a 5 round tournament, 30 players. I finished seventh. Um, my record was X2. My uh, so I faced Flunder, Branded Chimera, two Manadiums, and the Mathmech. My first loss was to the Branded Chimera. Um, so in game three, what happened was uh, I opened Panthera. I opened Vanquish. I opened Small World, but he ashed it. And my only real play was Panthera with Parallel, and I had two options. Um, because I didn't have access to. I didn't. I don't think it was Panthera. It was. I think it was the Rasen, but my opponent also stopped it, and I didn't have a way to tag it out. Um, but I had the Parallel Exceed, and I had two choices. Either choice number one was make Baguska and pass, um, or choice number two was go to Splash Mage Heat Soul, because I had Shared Writing Hand, and bank on my opponent just trying to like stop me before I get to my interruptions, because I also had Ash and I also had Impulsing Hand. Um, or I think it was no, I had Ash and Ghost Spell. I had Ash and Ghost Spell, and I drew into Impulse with this. So the problem with the Baguska play was that my opponent was playing Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse. I saw it in game one. So if they had it again, uh, I only had Ash and Bell as my defensive cards and nothing else. And that could have lost me the duel if he had enough to play around it. Um, so I went with the Heat Soul shared right play, and my opponent opened full gas. Um, I drew into like 8 cards, and out of the 8 cards, in order to win, I needed to draw DD Crow. Um, I needed to draw DD Crow, and I did not get to DD Crow. And because I didn't draw into the DD Crow, I lost because he activated Branded in White, which made it so he could banish Albaz from the grave to summon Albion. And with Albion, he banished like 4 illusion monsters, and he did the illusion beast chimera OTK. For those who are familiar with that, um, so that was my first loss. Um, my second loss was to the last to in the last round. Shout out to Diego. Um, he's a really good Manadium player. Um, he's the player that played around the shared ride. I won that game where he did that. Um, Game three, what happened was my hand was kind of weak. Pretty much my hand was it was Nib, Ash. It was Nibiru, Ash Blossom. Uh, it was Nib, Ash, Crow, Borger, and Panthera. That was my hand. And his hand was it was Imaginings, Realm Heart, Torrid, Visa Starfrost. I think that was his hand. He didn't have Imaginings. He had the Obsession. Oh, and he had Triple Talents. That was the last card in his hand. And sadly, that hand is stronger than this one. Um, like when it comes to Manadium, it's really really hard to not play around talents because that is a really high ceiling deck, and if they open enough extenders, you're gonna have to hand trap them early. Otherwise, they're just going to summon a bunch of safeguard cards like Baron and Dispatter, just to name like a couple of them, and it's gonna be really tough to like grind the duel outright. Um, they also have Excel Stardust that makes it so they can play around other cards. Um, he misplayed into my hand traps, but he also talents looked at my hand and he like put back the Panthera. So we were both in a top deck game, and in 2 turns he pretty much drew into his engine before I did, and that's what won him the duel. Um, but yeah, I still topped. It was a good event. In the future, I might have to side for Vanadium more because that is a very very scary deck, and even though it's not like the most common deck out there, um, it is a deck that under the right hands, like my two opponents, um, not even hand traps are enough to stop them. Um, and if they get to something like reframing plus Baron, it's really really hard for this deck to break. Um, I did have one duel. It was against the other Manadian player, Charles to Jorge. He had Baron and Dispatter as their interruptions, and in my hand I had Panthera, Parallel, Rosin, and Caesar. Like I had these four in hand. I also resolved the Fire Attacker, so I drew into two other cards. Um, so what happened in that game was, now I remember, the last card was Dust Devil. I had the Dust Devil in hand. So in that game, what ended up happening was I normaled the Rosin. He tried to dispatter to destroy it. I chained the Dust Devil because my reasoning was if he let this go through, I set his Baron, and his Baron is no longer a negate, and he already wasted his Dispatter, and I still have Panthera to special summon. If he does stop this, then I tag out the Rosin for the Caesar, and I tag out the Rosin for Caesar, and then the Caesar can deal with the rest of his board. And I still have the Parallel Exceed, and I still have the Panthera to special summon. If I link this away for Rock. So what ended up happening is he didn't negate with Baron. I couldn't activate Caesar because that would have meant that he would have negated the Caesar with the Baron, and then he got value out of it. So I kept the Caesar in hand. I let the Rosin get popped. I didn't have Panthera in hand. Panthera was actually the Rosin ad. So I added Panthera. I specialed the Panthera. I linked it away. I summoned Parallel. He didn't interrupt that. Parallel into Parallel. I summoned Chaka 9 and Borbo. I swung through his board, and then I made Zeus, and I cleared the board. So that's what ended up happening. But yeah, not every game plays the same way. Like I was pretty much lucky that he didn't have like the counter trap, because the Mananian counter trap was gonna be rough. Pretty much, if that happens, that's a really strong interruption. Um, but yeah, I kind of want to prepare for that deck more in the future because I feel like if we get a ban list, that deck might become more popular in the future. Another thing to note, I don't know if you guys noticed, but outside of Dust Devil, there is no out to Chaos Angel in this deck. Uh, there are no outs in the main deck at least, and not in the side deck either. So I also have to probably adjust the main deck for that, because my two Vanadium opponents also were running that. Thankfully, they didn't summon it on me. Um, but if they did, that pretty much would have won them the duel. Because this was literally like my only out. Um, so I just wanted to share those thoughts. Like when it comes to deck reports, since we're in a very open format, it's kind of important to like analyze all the duels that you have with your strategies. Um, if you want to keep playing them and be optimal with them, because um, right now not everybody thinks Vanquish Soul is like a very cool, like a really high meta deck or anything. But I feel like under the right hands, you can pretty much win an event with this deck if you know if you know the right matchups. Um, but yeah, that's it from me. I hope you found this informative. As always, stay tuned for the next video or whatever else I might bring. Keep practicing and keep dueling.